Okay, today we are going to talk about the Blacklist, which stars James. I keep wanting to call him Spader. I don't know if it's Spade or Spader. James Spader and others. I don't really know who they are, but they're not really important. The only real name recognition that they've got is James Spade, whatever his name is. We'll call him Red from now on. So, The Blacklist. This is a TV show which follows a Mr. Raymond Reddington, and he is basically a international info broker. So he's kind of like a middleman. He doesn't really do or enact necessarily crimes himself, but what he ends up doing is he connects a lot of people. So he's kind of, an arms dealer, deals in information, selling secrets, need new identities or a plane ride out of here or there or anything like that. He's got. So that's kind of his gist and his jam is that he's the guy who knows things and the guy who knows people who knows things and knows how to get stuff done. He's the most stereotypical I know people guy. And anyway, so this is Mr. Raymond Reddington, Raymington. All right, and he goes by the name of Red. That's kind of his code name is Red. Raymond Reddington. So this is, of course, played by James Spade. So the dynamic of the show, it follows kind of similarly what I'm calling the rival master-student relationship. And this one, immediately, if you've seen it, you would think of this as well. This basically the basic plot point between Red and Keen, Elizabeth Keen, who is the FBI agent that ends up working with Red, is the exact same thing between Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster, basically in Hannibal Lecter, the Hannibal Silence of the Lambs being the main one and probably the only one that really counts. But basically what you have here is you have an older man. It's an interesting dynamic. It's kind of like a father-daughter dynamic. I don't know what you call it. Can't think of it's not Oedipus, it's the other one. Electra complex. I don't think it's Electra. But either way, we'll go with that. So it's just an interesting, different atypical dynamic, basically. So what you have is you have a young girl and an older guy, and they kind of play this master-student, but specifically a rival master-student relationship. And we'll kind of go into that and kind of that makes that alluring and everything like that. And the rival master usually is some form of a anti-hero, basically. Anti-hero or not really antagonist. They're morally bad people usually. I think it's pretty safe to say, especially in the case of Hannibal Lecter. He's just a bad dude all around. There's no real way around it. But what you have is, here we go. We're going to say this is take one, this is take two. I can't actually draw Anthony Hopkins or draw anything, so you're going to draw a creepy, weird looking guy. And, whoever you think he looks like, that's who he is. That's kind of the magic of this. So, Anthony Hopkins in this rival master-student relationship. So, this is kind of the main dynamic that the show is building on. This is kind of the thing. So, if you want to think of it where, Hallmark movies, the relationship, the dynamic is built upon two people who are attractive and have great chemistry and don't like each other. That's what the dynamic that movie is built on. That's kind of, there's different aspects that different movies can kind of have that as their cornerstone, if you will, for it. So this is just the one that this happens to work for. Got something in my mouth. Work for this one. So the plot basically starts off with Raymond Reddington, and Red shows up, goes into the FBI building, the one with the giant eagle on the floor and everything that says all that nice lettering. So he goes in there and introduces himself, and of course it turns out in the course of this we learn that he is a wanted criminal. Surprise, surprise. He's on the most wanted list. He's basically all this other instincts. He's very criminal, very much criminal. And so he gets arrested, but immediately what this does is it establishes him as a very strong character. So this is my symbol that I use for strong character. So how do we do that? Number one, he's a wanted criminal. Number two, he gives himself up. He doesn't get caught. He gives himself up. Two, they're very scared of him. They have like 20 guys, 20 plus guys pointing guns at him when they arrest him. They arrest him and put him in this, black box basically, and he lives there more or less, and he just kind of sits there in his little chair kind of wondering what's going to happen next. And he says a very interesting thing, and he's dressed very nicely, he's got his hat and everything. He says something very interesting, which is, I will only talk to Elizabeth Keene. And so they're trying to figure out who Elizabeth Keene is. Turns out she's a rookie, and then we're introduced to Elizabeth Keene. So she is a rookie. She wakes up in bed with her husband, and she's late for a very important date. And so she shows up, and she's running, and she's fairly normal. This is kind of basically we have our normal person. And one aspect that's really, really kind of nice that seems to happen naturally in stories is where it really helps, especially if you're going to have a character that's an outlier, like a super strong criminal, international, blah, 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 blah guy. If you have a normal person to compare them with, because then they seem extra special, basically, from there when you're compared to normal. Because, again, it's the great line from The Incredibles, because if everyone's super, no one will be. And it is true. It is true, at least in this regard, which is probably not how they meant it, but we're going to go with it. So we have our special person that's going to be working alongside our normal person, and this is kind of what will feed into our dynamic. Again, so the FBI goes and gets Elizabeth Keene. She's a rookie FBI, day one on the job, and they're trying to ask her, how do you know Red? And she's like, I have no idea what's going on. And so Red does this thing that he does where he will say, ta-da! This is kind of the crux of how a lot of the episodes are going. And again, I guess so far I should say I'm only on like episode 4 or 5. I'm really early on, but I do enjoy these formulaic TV shows because I enjoy trying to piece together and figure out the formula. Because once you can figure out the formula, it's really, it doesn't really help you enjoy the show more, but it helps you enjoy the show for different reasons. Because, if you can guess who the murderer is in, minute 10 or 15, because he's that kind of tangentially side character who appears usually in the first 20 minutes and then again at 40 minutes TV shows with commercials. So maybe it appears at 10 minutes and then again at like 25, and then they're the bad guy. They're not the guy you first suspect or second suspect or third suspect. They're the person where they look back and the person who's been there the whole time. That's usually how all those murder mysteries go, and that's always how it is. It's very rarely like, well, it's the guy who we thought. The end, because they're trying to sell you a mystery, and it's not a good mystery if you can solve it. So he says this, and basically he always says something very vague and specific bad is going to happen, and he usually gives them some sort of like, this is the place. Maybe he'll give like a place plus time or something like that. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He kind of just knows that this or that will occur, basically. And that's one aspect of kind of where it goes wrong. So he's going to say this, and then of course the FBI is going to play the what could he know? Because I'm trying to make this look a little bit more like English. Because of course they're again playing the straight man where he's being the smart guy, so they kind of need to be the dumb guy. And the best dumb guys are not the people who are like, I don't know anything. They're the people who are super confident but super wrong. And that's what really makes the best one and makes that whole dynamic really, really work out better, because that's what you want. You want good dumb guys and bad guys and good guys. That's kind of how the whole dynamic works, because it doesn't help if somebody's just like, I don't know, and then everyone goes, that's a very reasonable take for something that you have no knowledge in, and then that's the end of it. It's like, no, of course not. You need to have people who are super confident that they know and they're super wrong, and the people super disagree, and everything's just super. And that's just the dynamic, because you're trying to notch it up to intensity. Notch up the intensity because you want people to watch your show and stay engaged and yada, 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 from there. So Raymond shows up, and he's like, I will only talk to her. Something bad's going to happen. They don't listen to him, and this is kind of the crux of how a lot of the show goes, where he's saying, again, I guess I do need to reinforce, I say it's going, and this is where it's at right now. It will probably change, maybe not. Because again, this is the serial television show, so nothing could change or a bunch of stuff could change. That's just kind of how it works. If I'm a betting man, they're not going to ruin their winning pattern. Because again, this is something that you could build a TV show on, just show over and over and over and over and over again for 4 to 6 seasons. 6 seasons in a movie, as it were. And that's kind of the aspect that a lot of television is run by. They're not run by storytellers, they're run by producers and the audience. So what you have to have is you have to have the audience to have the producers, and that's how it goes. Because again, you just want to tell a good story, and that's the most important thing for a lot of these things. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to entertain. So he says something specific and vague, that something bad is going to happen. In this case, it's a general's daughter is going to get kidnapped, and there's this guy named Romani Zamani. I don't actually know if it's Romani or Rowani, but we're going to call him Romani from now on. Zamani. He's a Serbian guy, and he is going to do something bad. And basically, Red is telling them about it. He's like, oh, he's going to come and he's going to do something bad. And they're like, how do you know that? And the first thing he does is, well, I snuck the guy into the country. That's how you know he's here. And they're like, no way, he's dead. Turns out he's in the country. So this is kind of an aspect that the show has to continually reinforce, is that Red is smart. Basically, you have to kind of emphasize this aspect. He needs to continually be smart because he has to continually reinforce his status as the master. And so what you have is you have this master, which then, of course, means that we need to reinforce the student role. And again, I said I would kind of talk a little bit more about this rival master student status, but yeah, so let's talk about that now. So let me paint you guys a picture. So we're going to have we're going to use karate. Let's use martial arts, kind of a Karate Kid, for example, not the actual Karate Kid, but karate. You are with your master, you're the good guys. So you're with your master and then the student, and the student trains and learns, and he overcomes and he fights the rival, and he fights this guy and he fights that guy, and eventually he comes through and he becomes victorious. He has this little plot point where he defeats the main villain. The main villain being the smug Karate Kid, who, of course, he uses that kind of duplicitous and cheating method right at the end, but the main character overcomes his fear, and then gets the girl, saves his family, and redeems the honor of his master, or something like that. That's the end of it. And so what we're going to do, that's that story. So that's the normal master-student relationship. It's the Obi-Wan character, Mr. Miyagi, character from there. Let's see. I don't know how to spell it, but we're going to get as close as we can. Dumbledore is another good example. Obi-Wan, Gandalf is another. They don't quite have the student aspect, except for Mr. Miyagi definitely does have that. But they play the teacher role. So I would say specifically, I'd say all this, but I feel like Obi-Wan and Mr. Miyagi are really the main master-student dynamics that kind of play out fairly prominently, and prominently being that there's not a whole lot of other clutter. Because Harry's definitely the student of Dumbledore, but it's not quite the same. So this is the normal dynamic. And what you learn is you learn honor, you learn all the good stuff, basically. This is how it is. You're playing above board. You have to train hard. You have to work hard and all this stuff. So if you're going to do a rival master-student relationship, what you get is you kind of get to enjoy all the stuff that the bad people do, but all the morality, the dubious moral weight and moral disdain and failure and all that falls on the master. And then the master can then share that to the student. And the student doesn't have to like it. Usually they end up not liking it. I'm going to put my hands in my pockets because it is freezing December cold out here. Student doesn't really like it, and oftentimes they don't, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to have this aspect where the master does something duplicitous, like maybe they cheat, or maybe they make sure, you get your bracket. You're fighting off against this one student that he wanted you to fight. Now you still want to make it a good story, so you can't make it so they're cheating to fight against the bad students. Maybe he cheats to make sure you fight against the strongest person round one because he wants to see what you're made of and test your mettle or something like that. But he cheats to do it. So he's not using this honor or method. What you do is basically unlock this entire access to all of this toolkit. So basically, if we have the toolkit, the moral toolkit right here, This is the stuff characters can do. And up here we have the good, and over here we have bad. And Mr. Miyagi's only operating out of this one, which is fine, because that's the story you're trying to tell. But we're trying to twist it. We're trying to change this one. So he's bad. So he's the bad guy. So he's going to have access to all this. And it's just a different, interesting story. This is kind of where the Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster comes through, is because he's able to help them, and he kind of has access into the mind of this psycho, and you start to, and the reason why is because he is a psycho, basically. He's also a brilliant psychologist or psychiatrist, I don't remember what it was, the guy who ate one of his patients, but that's what he is. So he's able to do this, and he kind of has this whole knowledge and aspect, and also you get to have a bad guy kind of be a good guy, which is the anti-hero aspect, which is different and new and kind of exciting. It's kind of more exciting than your traditional good justice man. Again, we all like good justice mans. This is kind of what the superheroes are able to do, is basically you have justice man and he does what's right even though it's hard. And that's great. We love those stories. But we also like other stories where vigilante man goes and does not necessarily the right thing, what you couldn't do, but however, that guy needs to die. Bam, bam, bam. Something like that, basically. All right, so there you go, villain. So this is kind of what the whole rival master student gives you. And this is more or less what the whole dynamic of the story is built on. Because what it does then, it allows you to interact with the criminal world as criminals. So you can interact with the criminal world as a criminal, but also as the good guy. And it's really tricky to do that because you don't want to just be the bad guy, especially if you want a serial TV show where you want to have moral people. Most people don't want you to run around killing people. So you could have just the anti-hero. That could be it. But again, that's not the story we're telling. What we're telling specifically is this rival master-student relationship where you have the good guys who are working with the bad guy to catch the other bad guys. And you get to enjoy, again, that kind of moral toolkit, basically, where you get to enjoy both sides of it. So you get to interact with the criminal world. You get to go hang out with bad guys. You get to have criminal things. You get to have this, luxury. Basically, he's in the know. You get to know the seedy, cool characters, basically, And Raymond's a great guy to do that because he gets to run around and he's the guy. I know a guy. So he's got a guy. He's got the criminal guy. He goes to a town and he knows the guy. And he's kind of this patron saint of criminals, and he kind of enjoys this status as basically the Pope or something. He works around, everybody knows him, everybody respects him, and he's got all these connections that he's built up over years and years and years of being a criminal. And that's the dynamic. That's what makes it work, and it does work really well. That's the thing, that's the main thing. And this is something that the reason why I kind of go back and on about coming up with this rhythm, basically, is this is something that you can repeat. And I may talk about that in another episode, is kind of the format. But once you have a plot format from this, you can just keep retelling it. And people actually will dislike it if you break the rhythm. And that's kind of the amazing thing here, is that you can have this rhythm and keep it and kind of continually do the same thing and have this format. And it works. This is the reason why everybody likes, stories based in a school, is because there's a format, there's a rhythm, there's all this going to it, and people like that. The reason why people like isekais, where they want this, basically, it's like, do you really want another janky, trashy isekai? And the answer is yes, apparently. Surprisingly enough, the answer is yes, they do want that. So this is kind of what you're preparing, is to understand the framework. And so as you look at your own stories or look at other standard stories, is what is the framework that they're operating off of that the audience really wants and enjoys. So, but yeah, that's all I've got for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.